At my son's wedding they ridiculed my gift and pushed me back. Then he opened my box. The envelope arrived on a quiet afternoon, slipped through the mail slot without ceremony. The older parent noticed it only because it lay alone on the floor, clean and stiff, as if it did not belong to the everyday clutter of bills and flyers. The paper was thick, expensive, and formal. Their hands paused before opening it, already knowing what it would say, yet unsure how it would be said. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Inside was an invitation to their son's wedding. The words were polite, carefully chosen, and distant. There was no note written by hand. No line that said he missed them. No sign that this moment meant anything more than tradition. The date and location were clear. The time was precise. Everything about it felt correct, and yet something was missing. Warmth. Familiarity. Love, spoken plainly. The parents sat at the small kitchen table for a long time, the invitation resting between their palms. They remembered a time when their son would run through this same room, barefoot, laughing, asking questions without pause. Those memories felt far away now, like photos left too long in the sun. Still visible, but faded. They told themselves not to read too much into it. Weddings were busy events. Young people had their own lives. Maybe this was just how things were done now. Even so, a quiet ache settled in their chest. The invitation felt less like a welcome and more like a requirement. As if attendance was expected, but presence was optional. That evening, the parent placed the invitation on the shelf beside old family pictures. They looked at it every day after that. Sometimes with hope. Sometimes with doubt. They wondered if there would be a seat for them that mattered, or if they would be tucked away, out of sight. They wondered if their son wanted them there, or simply felt it would look strange if they were not. Despite these thoughts, the parent decided to go. They would not let fear or pride keep them away from such an important moment. This was still their child, no matter how quiet the years between them had become. They made a simple promise to themselves. They would arrive with dignity, kindness, and an open heart, even if it went unnoticed. Soon, their thoughts turned to the gift. They knew they could not compete with expensive items or large displays. Money had never been plentiful, and they were no longer in a place to spend freely. But they did not want to give something forgettable either. This was their only child's wedding. The gift had to mean something. They spent days thinking, then weeks. They walked through stores, touching items without buying. Watches, picture frames, decorative pieces meant to sit on shelves and collect dust. None of it felt right. These things said nothing about love or history. They were objects without memory. Late at night, the parent found themselves opening old boxes stored in the back of the closet. Inside were reminders of another life. School drawings folded carefully. A small pair of shoes. Letters written long ago, full of hope and plans. The parents smiled softly as they went through them, though their eyes grew wet more than once. That was when the idea formed. Not suddenly, but gently, like a thought that had been waiting for the right moment. The gift would not be loud. It would not draw attention. But it would be honest. It would come from a place that could not be bought or replaced. The parent began working quietly. Every evening, after the house grew still, they sat at the table and prepared the gift with care. They took their time, checking every detail, correcting small mistakes, making sure it felt complete. There was no rush. This was not something that could be done quickly. As the wedding day grew closer, the parent also prepared themselves. They chose simple clothes, clean and neat, nothing that would stand out. They practiced calm smiles in the mirror, reminding themselves to stay composed no matter what happened. They told themselves they would not expect too much. That way, disappointment would not cut as deep. The night before the wedding, sleep came slowly. The parent lay awake, listening to the quiet sounds of the house. They thought about the past. About moments when they could have spoken more, listened better, done things differently. Regret has a way of growing louder in silence. They also thought about the future. About what this wedding might mean for their place in their son's life. Would it bring them closer, or push them further away? They did not know. All they knew was that tomorrow mattered, even if no one else seemed to see it that way. On the morning of the wedding, the parent rose early. They moved carefully, as if the day were fragile. After getting ready, they placed the gift in a plain box and tied it neatly. It did not look impressive. It did not shine. But it held weight in a different way. The drive to the venue felt longer than it was. The parent watched the scenery pass by, barely noticing it. Their thoughts were elsewhere, turning over the same questions again and again. Would they be greeted with warmth? Would their son smile when he saw them? Would there be time to speak, even briefly? When they arrived, the place was already busy. Cars lined the road. People moved in groups, laughing, greeting each other with ease. The parent stepped out slowly, holding the gift close. For a moment, they stood still, feeling like a guest who had arrived too early or too late. Someone who was not quite sure where to go. Inside, the room was beautifully arranged. Flowers, lights, soft music in the background. Everything looked perfect. The parent took it all in quietly, aware of how small they felt in such a large space. They scanned the room, searching for a familiar face. They spotted their son across the room, surrounded by others. He looked confident, happy, comfortable in a way the parent had not seen in years. Their heart lifted and sank at the same time. They wanted to approach him, but something held them back. Perhaps it was the fear of interruption. Perhaps it was the sense that their presence might not be needed. Someone guided the parent to their seat. It was near the back, close to the aisle but far from the center. Not hidden, but not highlighted either. The parent thanked them politely and sat down without complaint. They folded their hands in their lap and took a slow breath. From that seat, they watched guests arrive. Friends, relatives, people who seemed to know exactly where they belonged. Laughter filled the space. Stories were shared. The parent smiled when appropriate, nodded when spoken to, but remained mostly quiet. As the ceremony began, the parent focused on the moment. On the promise being made. On the idea of two lives joining. They felt genuine happiness for their son, even as a soft sadness lingered. Love, after all, does not disappear just because it is no longer returned in the same way. When the ceremony ended and the celebration continued, the parents stayed where they were. They did not push forward. They did not demand attention. They waited, patient as they had always been. At times, their son glanced in their direction. The looks were brief, unreadable. The parent could not tell if he was nervous, distracted, or simply unsure of what to do. Each glance carried hope, then uncertainty. The parent thought about the gift resting at their feet. They wondered how it would be received. Whether it would be opened with care or passed over without thought. They reminded themselves again not to expect too much. Even so, their heart beat a little faster as the moment drew closer. Not because they wanted praise, but because they wanted to be understood. To be seen, if only for a moment, not as an obligation, but as a parent who had loved quietly and endured distance without complaint. As the evening continued, the parents straightened their back and lifted their chin slightly. No matter what happened next, they would remain calm. They had come with good intentions and an honest heart. That, they told themselves, had to be enough. And so they waited, holding on to patience, dignity, and the small hope that sometimes, even after years of silence, love can still find a way to speak. The venue looked grand from the outside, dressed in flowers and soft lights that suggested joy and celebration. The parent paused for a moment before going in, adjusting their clothes and steadying their breath. They reminded themselves to stay calm, to not let small things affect them. Today was not about them, they repeated quietly. It was about their son. Inside, the air was filled with voices and movement. People greeted each other with excitement, some laughing loudly, others taking photos near the decorations. The parent stepped in slowly, holding the gift close, unsure of where to go. For a brief second, no one seemed to notice them, and that familiar feeling returned, the sense of standing slightly outside the circle. Soon, someone approached with a polite smile. The smile was professional, practiced, and brief. Without much conversation, the person gestured for the parent to follow. The parent nodded and walked behind them, passing rows of seats already filling up. As they moved forward, the parent noticed who was being seated where. Friends of the couple were guided toward the front rows. Co-workers laughed and chatted as they were placed near the center. Even distant relatives, people the parent barely recognized, seemed to be given spots close to the stage. The parent did not think much of it at first. Seating arrangements were complicated, after all. There were many guests, many preferences. They trusted that things would make sense in the end. Then they were guided to a seat near the back. Not the last row, but close enough that it felt deliberate. Close to an aisle, but far from the main focus. The person gestured again, still smiling, and said nothing more. The parents sat down slowly. They placed the gift at their feet and folded their hands in their lap. Around them, seats filled with people who spoke in low voices, some glancing around the room as if checking who else had arrived. For a moment, the parents simply observed. They watched as others were still being escorted to better spots. They noticed how carefully those seats were chosen, how much attention was given to making sure certain people were comfortable and visible. No one explained the seating choice to them. No one apologized or offered a reason. There was no sign that this placement was temporary. The message did not need words. It settled quietly, but firmly. The parent felt it in their chest, a small tightening they had hoped to avoid. They told themselves again not to overthink. Maybe this was just how it worked out. Maybe the front seats were already full. Still, the pattern was hard to ignore. From where they sat, the stage looked distant. The decorations were still visible, but details blurred slightly. The parent leaned back, careful not to block anyone's view, suddenly aware of how much space they occupied. They noticed whispers nearby. Not loud enough to hear clearly, but enough to feel. A few glances were thrown in their direction, quick and curious. Not unkind, but not warm either. The parent wondered what people thought when they saw them sitting there alone. Did they assume this was just another guest? Did they know this was the groom's parent? The thought stung more than expected. It was not about pride. It was about belonging. The parent straightened their posture. They refused to shrink into the seat, even as the feeling of being minimized pressed in. They reminded themselves that they had earned their place in their son's life, even if others did not see it. As more guests arrived, the contrast became clearer. Laughter near the front sounded brighter, louder. Conversations near the back stayed quieter, more reserved. The parent felt like they were watching the celebration from behind glass. They looked around for their son, hoping he might notice. Hoping he might come over and say something, even briefly. But he remained busy, moving from group to group, smiling, shaking hands, fully engaged in the moment. The parent told themselves not to interrupt. They had waited years for this day to come. They would not be the one to create discomfort. They stayed seated, patient, as they had learned to be over time. Memories surfaced without warning. School events where the parent had sat alone in folding chairs. Performances where applause came late or not at all. Moments when being present did not always mean being acknowledged. They wondered when this distance had started. There was no single argument, no dramatic falling out. Just small gaps that grew wider over time. Missed calls. Short replies. Conversations that stayed on the surface. A soft sigh escaped the parents' lips. They quickly masked it, not wanting to draw attention. They focused instead on the details around them. The flowers, the lighting, the careful planning that had gone into this day. They felt proud of their son. Truly proud. Despite everything, he had built a life, formed connections, and found someone to share it with. That pride remained, untouched by seating charts or whispered looks. Still, the placement hurt. Not because it was inconvenient, but because it felt symbolic. As if it reflected their place in his life now, still included but no longer central. The ceremony was about to begin. Music softened conversations, drawing everyone's attention forward. The parent adjusted in their seat and leaned slightly to see better. From this angle, faces on the stage were harder to read. As the first notes played, the parent felt a familiar mix of emotions. Joy for their child. Sadness for themselves. Acceptance layered over disappointment. They noticed that no one came to check on them. No one asked if the seat was comfortable. No one offered a closer place once others had settled. The silence confirmed what had already been understood. The parent clasped their hands together and focused on breathing evenly. They would not let this moment break them. They had survived harder things than being overlooked. When their son appeared, the room shifted with excitement. Applause rose, and heads turned. From the back, the parent watched carefully, memorizing the moment. They smiled, even as their eyes grew damp. They wondered if their son saw them. If he noticed where they were sitting. If it crossed his mind that his parent was far away from the front, watching quietly. The parent chose not to dwell on it. They believed that love did not require a front row seat. That presence still mattered, even from a distance. As vows were exchanged, the parent listened closely. Each word carried weight. Promises of care, support, and partnership echoed through the room. The parent felt a gentle ache, wishing some of those promises had been spoken to them as well. When the ceremony ended, people stood, smiling and clapping. The parent joined in, standing slowly, applauding with steady hands. Their expression remained calm, composed. As guests began moving toward the next part of the celebration, the parents stayed where they were for a moment longer. They watched others rush forward, eager to be close, to be seen. They understood then that seating was never just about space. It was about importance. About who was meant to be noticed. The parent picked up the gift and held it firmly. Whatever the message of the seating had been, they would not let it define them. They were still a parent. They still carried years of love, sacrifice, and quiet strength. They took one last look toward the front before turning away, preparing for what would come next. The seat had spoken clearly, but the parent was not finished listening, or responding. The celebration moved into the next phase with gentle music and the clinking of glasses. Chairs shifted, people stood and regrouped, and the room filled with a louder, looser kind of energy. Conversations overlapped. Laughter echoed freely now that the formal ceremony had ended. The parent followed the slow flow of guests, keeping a respectful distance, the small box still held carefully in both hands. A table had been set aside for gifts near the front of the room. It was already crowded. Boxes of every size were stacked neatly, some wrapped in glossy paper that reflected the lights above. Shiny ribbons curled at the edges. Gift bags stood tall, decorated with gold letters and bold patterns. Everything sparkled. Everything looked impressive. The parent paused a few steps away, taking it all in. Their box looked different even from a distance. It was plain, wrapped in simple paper, secured with care rather than decoration. There was no shine to it, no bright color to catch the eye. It looked modest among the rest. They hesitated, just for a second. Not because they doubted the gift itself, but because they knew how it might appear. In a room full of excess, simplicity often gets misunderstood. Still, the parent moved forward. They placed the box gently on the table, choosing a spot where it would not topple or be crushed beneath heavier packages. Their hands lingered for a moment, smoothing the edge, as if saying a quiet goodbye. As they stepped back, a soft sound reached their ears. A short laugh. Not loud, not open, but unmistakable. Then another voice. Lower, closer. Someone muttered a comment that did not need to be repeated to be understood. Guess not everyone went all out, a voice whispered, just loud enough. Another replied with a smirk, some people give gifts that match their place. The words landed heavier than they should have. The parent felt the heat rise in their face, quick and unwelcome. They had not expected praise, but ridicule still cut deep. They did not turn around. They did not respond. They simply stood still for a moment, breathing slowly, letting the embarrassment wash over them without reaction. Years of quiet endurance had taught them how to remain composed when others were careless. Nearby, someone else chuckled and shook their head. The parent caught the look from the corner of their eye. Curious. Judging. Dismissive. The look said what the words implied. Cheap. Unimportant. Easy to overlook. The parent reminded themselves why they were here. Why they had chosen this gift. It was not meant to impress strangers. It was meant for one person only. They stepped away from the table and found a place to stand near the side of the room. From there, they watched as more gifts were added. Large boxes wrapped in dark colors. Envelopes slipped quietly beneath ribbons. Someone mentioned a luxury item out loud, drawing admiration from those nearby. The contrast was clear. Some gifts announced themselves. Others waited quietly. The parent held their posture steady. Shoulders back. Chin level. They would not allow their discomfort to show. If others chose to laugh, that was their burden, not the parent's. A server passed by with drinks. The parent declined politely. Their mouth felt dry, but they did not want anything that might make their emotions harder to manage. They preferred clarity. They glanced toward their son, who stood surrounded by friends. He was laughing, relaxed, fully absorbed in the celebration. The parent wondered if he had heard the comments. If he had noticed the difference between the gifts. If he would care. The thought lingered, painful and unresolved. More whispers floated through the space. Some were harmless. Others were not. The parent caught fragments of words, none directed at them directly, but close enough to sting. They didn't even bother wrapping it nicely. Probably something symbolic. That small. Really. Each remark pressed gently but firmly against the parent's composure. They kept their eyes forward, their expression neutral. Inside, however, a familiar ache returned. The kind that comes from being measured and found lacking. They thought about all the years they had gone without recognition. All the sacrifices that never came with applause. Long days. Quiet nights. Decisions made for someone else's future, not their own. None of that fit inside a shiny box. The parent reminded themselves again that dignity did not depend on approval. They had learned that lesson slowly, over time. Today would not undo it. As the room buzzed with activity, someone announced that gifts would be opened later. The comment drew excitement. People speculated loudly, guessing what was inside certain packages. Some mentioned prices openly, as if cost alone defined value. The parent listened without joining in. Their gift did not lend itself to guessing. It did not invite attention. That had been intentional. A memory surfaced then, uninvited but vivid. Their son as a child, opening a simple gift with wide eyes and genuine joy. A handmade item. A thoughtful gesture. Back then, meaning mattered more than appearance. The parent wondered when that had changed. They shifted their weight, adjusting their stance. Embarrassment still lingered, but it no longer burned as sharply. In its place was a steadier feeling. Resolve. They had chosen honesty over show. That choice still felt right. Across the room, laughter grew louder. A group gathered near the gift table, pointing out items, joking freely. The parent noticed a few glances thrown their way again. Quicker this time. More confident. As if the judgment had already been decided. They did not flinch. Instead, the parent focused on the box itself. On what it represented. The time spent preparing it. The care taken with every detail. The love folded quietly inside. No one else knew its weight. That was fine. A sudden urge rose to explain. To say something. To defend themselves. To tell the room that value was not always loud. That some gifts carried stories, not price tags. They let the urge pass. Silence, they had learned, could be stronger than explanation. As the evening continued, the parent found a seat along the wall. From there, they could see most of the room without being in the center of it. They sat down carefully, smoothing their clothes, maintaining calm. The small box now rested on the table across the room, indistinguishable among the larger gifts. It seemed even smaller from this distance. Almost fragile. The parent felt another wave of embarrassment, softer this time, mixed with sadness. Not because the gift was simple, but because simplicity had become something to mock. They watched as people passed by the table, touching ribbons, lifting boxes slightly, guessing at contents. A few glanced at the parent again, then back at the gifts, as if connecting dots. The parent met none of those looks directly. They stared instead at the lights overhead, at the way they softened shadows and blurred edges. Everything looked gentle under that glow. Even judgment. They wondered if their son would open the gift in public or private. If the laughter would grow louder when it was unwrapped. If the room would fall silent, or if it would barely notice at all. They prepared themselves for any outcome. A voice inside them, quiet but firm, reminded them that they had already done their part. They had shown up. They had given with intention. They had stayed respectful in the face of discomfort. No reaction from the crowd could take that away. As time passed, the embarrassment settled into something steadier. A kind of acceptance. The parent knew they could not control how others perceived them. They could only control how they carried themselves. They chose grace. They straightened their back once more and lifted their head. Whatever laughter had followed their gift, it would not follow them. They would not carry it home. The box might be small. The wrapping might be plain. But what it held had been built over a lifetime. And that, the parent knew, was nothing to laugh at. The noise of the celebration continued around the parent, but their mind drifted elsewhere. Sitting quietly along the wall, they found themselves slipping into memories that had never been spoken out loud. Years that existed without witnesses. Choices made without applause. A life built quietly, one careful step at a time. Long before this wedding, before the distance, before the formal invitation, there had been responsibility. It arrived early, settling on the parents' shoulders without warning. There had been no guide, no reassurance that things would turn out well. Only the understanding that someone depended on them. Work had come first for many years. Not because it was loved, but because it was necessary. Early mornings. Long evenings. Hands tired in ways that sleep did not always fix. The parent remembered counting expenses carefully, putting needs before wants, stretching small amounts to cover big responsibilities. There were comforts they never allowed themselves. Clothes worn longer than they should have been. Meals skipped or simplified. Small desires quietly dismissed. Not out of bitterness, but out of priority. The child's future mattered more than the parent's present. The parent remembered standing in stores, holding items they would not buy, calculating costs in their head. School supplies were chosen first. Shoes that fit growing feet. Books that promised opportunity. There was pride in providing, even when it meant going without. Time had been another sacrifice. Hours that could have been spent resting were given to extra work. Moments that might have been used for enjoyment were traded for stability. The parent remembered coming home late, exhaustion heavy, still finding the energy to listen, to help, to guide. Love had not always been spoken. Words had felt less important than actions. The parent believed that showing up mattered more than saying the right thing. Being reliable. Being present. Being steady. They remembered sitting quietly at school events, watching from a distance, content just to see their child succeed. No need to be noticed. No need to be thanked. Pride lived comfortably in silence. There were moments of doubt, too. Nights when worry crept in, asking whether any of it would be enough. Whether the sacrifices would be understood or simply expected. Those thoughts were pushed aside quickly. The parent chose trust instead. As the years passed, independence grew. The child needed less guidance, less protection. Conversations shortened. Shared moments became fewer. The parent noticed the change but did not resist it. Letting go, they believed, was part of loving well. Still, silence settled in where closeness had once lived. Calls became occasional. Visits brief. The parent told themselves this was normal. That distance did not erase connection. Now, sitting at the wedding, those memories gathered quietly, lining up like chapters in a book no one else had read. The parent did not feel anger. Only a gentle sadness that such a long story could be reduced to assumptions. Their thoughts returned to the gift. The small box resting among larger ones. Inside it was not just an object, but a history. Time pressed into something tangible. Care shaped into form. Each detail of the gift carried meaning. Choices made thoughtfully. Pieces gathered patiently. Nothing rushed. Nothing careless. The parent had poured years into it without realizing it until it was complete. No one else knew what it represented. No one else could see the connection between past and present. To them, it was just another item on a table. To the parent, it was a bridge. They remembered working on it late at night, hands steady despite fatigue. They remembered pausing often, not from uncertainty, but from reflection. Each step brought back memories of earlier years, of promises made quietly. The parent smiled faintly at the thought. The gift was never meant to explain everything. It was meant to remind, to carry meaning without demanding attention. They believed that true love did not announce itself. It waited patiently to be recognized. Sometimes it never was. That had to be acceptable. Across the room, laughter rose again. The celebration moved forward, unaware of the weight sitting inside that small box. The parent watched calmly, feeling the past settle into place inside them. They realized then that the gift was as much for themselves as it was for their son. It was proof that their years had not been empty. That their efforts had taken shape, even if unseen. The parent felt a quiet strength return. A steadiness built from surviving without validation. They had lived long enough to know that recognition often came late, if at all. They did not regret their choices. Not the work. Not the missed comforts. Not the silence. Love had guided them, and love had been enough. As they sat there, surrounded by noise and celebration, the parent felt grounded in that truth. Whatever happened when the gift was opened would not change the history it held. The box remained closed for now, its meaning hidden. But the parent knew that some things did not need an audience to matter. They took a slow breath and allowed themselves a moment of peace. Their story had been lived fully, even if quietly. And that, they believed, was something worth honoring. The reception moved along with ease, guided by music, conversation, and the steady rhythm of celebration. Plates were cleared, glasses refilled, and people drifted from group to group. The gift table stood quietly to one side, crowded but mostly ignored for the moment. Eventually, attention turned toward it. Someone mentioned it casually, suggesting it was time to start opening gifts. A few guests nodded with interest. Others leaned closer, curious to see what had been given. The mood was light, expectant, almost playful. The son approached the table with an easy smile. He looked relaxed, confident, comfortable in the center of attention. People gathered around him, forming a loose circle. Some held drinks. Others held phones, ready to record moments they assumed would be entertaining. One by one, he picked up gifts. Larger boxes came first. He read cards aloud, laughed at jokes, thanked people warmly. When an expensive item was revealed, someone whistled softly. A few guests clapped. The reactions were predictable, rehearsed by years of social habit. The small box remained near the edge of the table. When the son finally reached it, there was a brief pause. A couple of people exchanged glances. Someone smirked, expecting the moment to pass quickly. The box looked almost fragile compared to the rest. The son picked it up with one hand. It felt lighter than most. He glanced at the simple wrapping, then at the card. His expression stayed neutral. There was no rush. No ceremony. He opened it casually, as if expecting nothing more than a token. At first, there was silence only because people were waiting for him to speak. He looked down into the box, then tilted it slightly, adjusting his grip. His smile faded, not sharply, but gradually, as if something inside had shifted his focus. He looked again, more carefully this time. Those closest to him noticed first. A change in posture. The way his shoulders stiffened slightly. The way his hand stopped moving. Someone cleared their throat, sensing that the moment was no longer light. The son lifted the item from the box slowly. It was clear now that this was not something ordinary. Not something chosen at random. His fingers traced its edges as if recognizing something familiar. A few whispers rippled through the group. "What is it? That doesn't look cheap." Why did he stop smiling? The son did not answer. His attention was fully on what he held. He turned it gently, reading details others could not see from where they stood. His face grew serious, thoughtful. The laughter nearby softened. Conversations slowed. People leaned in, curiosity replacing judgment. Across the room, the parent noticed the shift. They did not move. They did not stand or approach. They simply watched, hands folded, heart steady but alert. The son's eyes moved quickly, scanning the surface of the gift. Then he paused, staring at one specific detail. His breath caught, just slightly. The room grew quieter. Someone stopped recording. Another lowered their drink. The change was subtle, but unmistakable. This was no longer entertainment. It was something else. The son swallowed and looked up briefly, as if searching for confirmation. His gaze moved across the room, passing faces without recognition, until it landed near the back. For a moment, his eyes met the parents'. The parent did not smile. They did not wave. They simply held the look, calm and open, as they always had. The son looked back down at the gift, his grip tightening slightly. He opened an inner compartment, revealing something hidden from casual view. A small detail, easy to miss, but impossible to ignore once seen. A low murmur spread. Someone leaned closer, curiosity turning into concern. "Is everything okay?" a guest asked quietly. The son did not respond right away. His expression had changed completely now. The ease was gone. In its place was recognition. Memory. Understanding arriving late, but forcefully. He exhaled slowly, as if steadying himself. Then he spoke, but not loudly. "I didn't expect this," he said. The words carried further than he intended. People fell silent, sensing weight behind them. He looked again toward the back of the room. Toward the parent who had been seated quietly, overlooked for most of the evening. The gift rested in his hands, no longer small, no longer simple. It felt heavier now, filled with meaning that could not be explained quickly. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. A few glanced at one another, realizing that their earlier assumptions might have been wrong. The son closed the box carefully, not hiding the gift, but protecting it. He held it close to his chest for a moment longer than expected. The room waited. Whatever was inside that box had changed something. The energy had shifted. The laughter that once surrounded the gift table did not return. And though many still did not understand why, they could feel it. This was not a gift meant to impress. It was a gift meant to remind. And almost everyone had missed it. The room waited in a way that felt unfamiliar. Not tense, but attentive. The kind of silence that forms when people sense something important has surfaced, even if they do not yet understand it. The son stood still near the gift table, the small box resting in his hands. He did not rush to speak. He opened it again, this time with care, as though afraid of damaging what lay inside. His fingers moved slowly, deliberately, lifting one item after another. Inside were papers, aged but carefully kept. Not official-looking at first glance. Not decorative. Just documents folded neatly, edges softened by time. Beneath them were letters, handwritten, the ink slightly faded but still clear. Someone nearby leaned closer, trying to see. Another stepped back, sensing this was not meant to be crowded. The son unfolded one document and scanned it. His brow tightened. He read it again, slower this time. His breathing changed. The paper told a story he had never fully known. A decision made years ago. A choice that carried risk and consequence. One that altered the course of his life without his awareness. He picked up a letter next. The handwriting was familiar, though he had not seen it in a long time. His throat tightened as he read the first lines. They were not dramatic. They were practical. Loving in a quiet way. Written not to impress, but to explain, should the need ever arise. The letter spoke of a moment when the parent had been forced to choose. Between security and uncertainty. Between personal comfort and long-term possibility. The choice had been made without hesitation. The son swallowed. Around him, people shifted. The earlier confidence in the room had faded. Faces grew serious. No one laughed now. No one whispered. The son continued reading. Another page. Another letter. Each one added weight, building a picture that had never been fully shown to him before. Years ago, when opportunities were limited and resources tight, the parent had made a sacrifice. A major one. Something that could not be undone. Something that ensured the son's future would be protected, even if the parent's own stability suffered. The documents showed dates. Signatures. Decisions finalized quietly, without announcement. The letters explained why nothing had been said at the time. Why the parent had chosen silence over credit. The son felt heat behind his eyes. He blinked, once, then again, steadying himself. He remembered moments from his childhood differently now. Certain absences. Certain struggles he had never questioned. Times when things had been difficult, but explanations were vague. He had assumed it was simply how life was. It had not been chance. It had been choice. A choice made for him. The son lowered himself into a nearby chair, still holding the papers. The movement caught attention. People leaned back slightly, giving him space. The shift in energy was complete now. This was no longer a celebration pause. This was a reckoning. He looked up briefly, his eyes scanning the room, then settling again toward the back. Toward the parent who sat quietly, hands folded, expression calm. The parent did not look away. The son's voice, when it came, was unsteady but clear. "I didn't know," he said. Not loudly. Not as an announcement. Just a truth spoken aloud for the first time. No one responded. The letters explained how the parent had chosen to give up something meant for their own future so the son could have access to education, stability, and opportunity. It explained how that decision had followed the parent for years, shaping their life quietly. There was no blame in the words. No bitterness. Only explanation. Only love. The son felt the weight of it settle fully. Everything he had built. Every step that had felt natural, expected. It all rested on something he had never seen. He thought of the jokes made earlier. The smirks. The assumption that the small box meant small effort. His chest tightened. He closed the letters slowly and placed them back in the box, arranging them carefully, as if restoring order. Then he looked up again. The room was silent enough that the hum of lights could be heard. No music played. Conversations had stopped entirely. Some guests looked uncomfortable now. Others looked thoughtful. A few looked ashamed. The meaning was spreading, even without full details. The son stood, holding the box with both hands. He did not raise it. He did not show the contents. He did not feel the need to explain everything. He took a step away from the table. Then another. Each step was slow, intentional. He moved toward the back of the room. People parted without being asked. The path cleared naturally. No one spoke. No one interrupted. The parent watched him approach, their heart steady but full. They did not rise. They did not brace themselves. They simply waited. When the son stopped in front of them, he hesitated. For a moment, he looked like a child again. Unsure. Exposed. He held the box out slightly, as if returning something precious. "I should have known," he said quietly. The parent met his eyes. There was no accusation there. No satisfaction. Only understanding. "You weren't meant to," the parent replied softly. The words carried no resentment. They were gentle. Honest. The son exhaled shakily. He nodded once, unable to speak for a moment. The room remained silent, every eye drawn to the exchange. What had once been laughter now felt distant and inappropriate. The truth had settled too deeply for that. The gift was no longer just a box. It was a history revealed. A sacrifice acknowledged at last. And in that quiet space, surrounded by people who had nearly missed it, the weight of what the parent had done finally found its place. The son remained standing near the back of the room, the small box still in his hands. He did not move right away. He did not speak. Instead, he looked at the parent in a way he never had before. Not with distance. Not with habit. But with attention. For the first time, he saw the years written quietly on the parent's face. Not as age, but as effort. As endurance. Lines shaped by responsibility, not weakness. Hands that had carried more than they ever showed. The parent sat calmly, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. They did not look proud. They did not look wounded. They looked present. Fully, patiently present. Something shifted in the son's expression. His jaw tightened, then loosened. Emotion rose slowly, like water filling a space he had ignored for too long. He remembered moments differently now. Times when he had felt protected without knowing why. Doors that had opened easily. Problems that had resolved themselves before becoming crises. He had mistaken those things for luck. They had been love. Around them, the room remained quiet, but it was no longer neutral. Discomfort spread softly among the guests. People avoided each other's eyes. A few glanced again at the gift table, then back toward the parent, connecting pieces too late. The jokes made earlier felt heavy now. The laughter seemed careless in memory. Some guests shifted their weight, suddenly aware of their own assumptions. The son took a slow breath and turned slightly, no longer shielding the parent from view. Without announcing anything, without explaining details, he had already changed the room's focus. He cleared his throat, then stopped. Words felt too small. Instead, he walked a step closer to the parent. Then another. Each movement drew attention. Phones that had once been raised stayed lowered now. Conversations did not restart. The moment demanded respect, even from those who did not fully understand it. The son stopped beside the parent and lowered himself into the seat next to them. The gesture was simple, but it carried weight. The place near the back no longer felt distant. It felt deliberate. He leaned slightly toward the parent and spoke quietly, meant only for them. "I didn't see it," he said. "I should have." The parent listened without interruption. They did not rush to reassure him. They did not dismiss his regret. They allowed it to exist. "We all see things when we're ready," the parent replied softly. The son nodded, eyes fixed ahead. Emotion tightened his chest. Regret, when it comes late, often comes heavy. He realized then how easily he had let distance grow. How comfort had replaced curiosity. How he had accepted presence without questioning its cost. Behind them, the room remained still. Guests pretended to adjust chairs or sip drinks, giving space while feeling the weight of what had unfolded. A few faces showed embarrassment openly now. Brows furrowed. Smiles gone. They had judged a box without knowing its story. They had mistaken quiet for lack. The parent felt the shift but did not savor it. This was not vindication. It was understanding, arriving at last. The son straightened and looked out at the room briefly. His eyes did not accuse. They did not challenge. But the message was clear enough. Respect had been misplaced. He turned back to the parent and lowered his voice again. "I'm sorry," he said. The words were simple, unpolished, real. The parent met his gaze. They nodded once. No lecture followed. No list of grievances. Forgiveness, when it is quiet, does not need performance. The son exhaled, some tension easing from his shoulders. He remained seated beside the parent, not in the center of attention, but no longer apart from them. Gradually, the room began to breathe again. Not with laughter, but with awareness. Conversations restarted in hushed tones. The celebration continued, altered but intact. Yet something permanent had changed. The parent was no longer invisible. They had not raised their voice. They had not defended themselves. They had not demanded acknowledgement. And still, they had been seen. The small box rested between them now, no longer a point of judgment, but a reminder of what had been given, of what had been missed. The son stayed close, as if afraid that distance might return if he moved away too soon. For the parent, the moment was not about regret or apology. It was about recognition. About love finally being understood for what it had always been. In that shared silence, surrounded by people reconsidering their assumptions, something settled gently between them. Not perfection. Not erasing the past. But truth. And sometimes, that is enough. The celebration slowly returned to motion, but it was different now. Softer. More aware. Conversations resumed with care, and laughter, when it came, was quieter and less careless. The moment that had unfolded lingered in the air, shaping everything that followed. The parent remained seated beside the son, not drawing attention, not seeking it. They did not expect apologies from the room. They did not look around to see who felt embarrassed or uncomfortable. That had never been the purpose. They had only wanted their love to be understood. The son stayed close, as if distance itself had become something to question. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried intention. Small comments. Gentle check-ins. Simple presence. None of it erased the past, but it acknowledged it. The parent noticed the effort and accepted it quietly. Healing, they knew, was not a sudden change. It was a series of small, honest steps. Later, when the room thinned and guests began to leave, the son helped the parent stand. The gesture was natural, unforced. It was not dramatic, but it mattered. They walked together toward the exit, passing the gift table once more. The larger boxes still sat there, impressive and untouched. The small box was no longer among them. It rested carefully under the son's arm. Outside, the air felt cooler, calmer. The noise of the evening faded behind them. For a moment, neither spoke. "I wish I had asked more," the son said finally. "I thought I understood. I didn't." The parent considered the words before answering. "Understanding comes when we're ready," they said gently. "What matters is what we do once we see." The son nodded. There was no defense in him now. No need to explain himself. Just acceptance. They stood there for a moment longer, side by side, not as strangers held together by obligation, but as people learning how to meet each other again. The parent felt no triumph. No need to teach a lesson aloud. Life had done that quietly. They thought about the years ahead. About what this shift might mean. They did not expect perfection. They did not expect constant closeness. They only hoped for honesty. That felt possible now. As the parent prepared to leave, the son hugged them. Not quickly. Not out of formality. He held on for a moment longer than expected. The parent returned the embrace, steady and warm. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. Later, alone again, the parent reflected on the day. On the seat at the back. On the laughter. On the small box that had nearly been overlooked. They realized that love does not always announce itself. It works quietly. It sacrifices without keeping score. And often, it waits longer than it should to be recognized. But when it is, even imperfectly, it has the power to change everything. The parent did not regret their silence. They did not regret their choices. Every sacrifice had been made freely, guided by care, not expectation. If there was a lesson in all of it, it was a simple one. Respect should never depend on appearances. Value cannot always be measured by size or shine. And the quietest gifts, the ones given without attention or praise, often carry the greatest weight. With that understanding, the parent felt at peace. Their love had been seen. And that was enough.